I look at what he's doing, and I have a theory that he's trying to goad us to impeach him.
Oh, sure.
You're
absolutely right.
Not just because he doesn't want you to have the information.
No, well, that's about power.
Right,
it's all about power. Well, that's why I have said when people keep after me on the impeachment, he's not worth it.
Right.
He's not worth it because he wants us to go to that place so that we're not focusing on whatever else.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on the podcast, and Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel joins our roundtable this morning. Also, former New Jersey Governor, ABC News contributor Chris Christie, Maggie Haberman, White House correspondent for the New York Times, and Sungmin Kim, White House reporter for the Washington Post. And Maggie, we just heard Rahm and the House Speaker right there saying the president's trying to goad them into impeachment. That's exactly what you reported in the New York Times this week.
Right, or at least trying to goad them into saying that's what they're doing. I think that there is an effort by the people around the president to make Democrats have to provide a stark choice. Yes, this is what we are doing. This is how we are going about it. And they think, the president's folks, this will be politically damaging for Democrats. I think that the House Speaker feels the same way. She made that pretty clear in her podcast with you. I don't think that it's going to end up going to that point, but I do think you are going to see the White House essentially just draw a line in the sand. We're not cooperating because this is what you're trying to do.
And Sungmin, that's exactly what you reported on this morning in the Washington Post, detailing now 20 different investigations that the White House is stonewalling. Basically, with what Adam Schiff said, we're across the board nose, and that is propelling more Democrats to say we might have to move to impeachment proceedings.
Exactly. I mean, we've focused a lot on matters involving the Mueller investigation and other related issues for the last several days, but the lack of cooperation by this administration on matters directly related to the White House, to the president, to his personal finances is pretty vast. I mean, they are investigating his immigration policies, have heard not a lot at all, investigating the federal response to Puerto Rico, even Jared Kushner's trip to Saudi Arabia, conversations between the president and Vladimir Putin in the Helsinki summit last summer. But this is why you've heard kind of a shift or more of an uptick in rhetoric from Democrats on why they might have to pursue, why impeachment might be at the end of the road, because you've heard Nancy Pelosi, Jerry Nadler keep saying things like the lack of cooperation is kind of the bigger issue for us right now, not necessarily his conduct.
And Rahm, it did seem this week that pressure was building at the base of the House Democrats saying, you know, Nancy, we might not have a choice.
Well, here's the thing. You got a couple things. One, I would, in the House, pull back, recalibrate totally on Mueller and his presentation. Two, on all the obstructions or all the pieces in which the administration is fighting, sequence them. They're not all equal, all 20 that were written today in the Post. Which one is the best one to win the legal case? The first one. That sets the precedent for all the other 19 that follow. Third, you know, Democrats have this gene, it's in our DNA of responsibility. Then all over here is a presidential election, which is also the single most overarching thing for the base. We have to, between those two goalposts, we have to kick perfectly. And you have to keep moving without the investigation overwhelming the legislating. And that's what it's doing right now.
Yeah, listen, the problem is that they've not shown the discipline to be able to pull that off. He's right. In every
they haven't hit a goalpost yet.
No, not yet. But the problem is that they're jumping towards the bait. They haven't bitten it yet, but they're jumping out of the water like a fish towards the bait. And this encourages the president to do what he's doing. Now, listen, I think there are things that are divisible. I think some of those investigations that are written about this morning, the White House shouldn't stonewall some of those. Healthcare, immigration, on the substance, because the president has substantive things to say on those issues. Go out and defend your position. Now, you know, on the tax returns and the other things, I understand the position he's taking, and he.
But you would agree that he's decided an absolutist approach is, and that's where the mistake will be. That's where his fault will be.
Well, it may be depending upon the Democrats' reaction. Now, if they take the reaction that you suggest, then it will turn out to be a mistake for the president. If they take the reaction he's anticipating, and you can see because of all these different little fiefdoms within the House, they all want to have their moment. Adam Schiff on here this morning, Jerry Nadler.
That's
exactly right. They're going to jump for it.
One of the things I wonder, and I want to bring this to Maggie, is that I wonder, though, if the courts are going to provide the protection that the president is looking for. Not necessarily that they think they're going to win all these cases. In fact, they're on weak ground on several of them, but hoping to delay through the election. We are seeing more evidence from the courts that they're prepared to move more quickly.
We are, but I don't know how quickly that's going to be, and we don't know what it's going to look like on appeal, and we don't know how long that's going to last. Donald Trump, as long as I have covered him, which is a fairly long time at this point, has always used the courts as a way to mitigate all manner of disputes, and he's essentially treating it the same way. One of the interesting things about how he's going about this is he is trying to act both as president and private citizen. So when it comes to his taxes, he's acting as a private citizen. When it comes to the investigations, he's acting as a president, but suggesting things like health care on issues of policy, but they are suggesting there's an overreach by the House. And one of the ways that Donald Trump navigates politics is he turns everything into an up-down referendum on himself. That's what he's doing right now. He's trying to make it a stark choice. He is not recognizing the institutional authority of the House on any level, and he is going to look toward the courts to try to...
And what if they strike him down?
Strike the president down? Well, they'll keep going. Here's what I would say as a guiding North Star for the Democrats. A little less on Trump and a lot more on the American people. Focus on where they are on their health care. That's how we won in 2018. Where are they in affording college for their children? Where are they in making sure that they have the skills they need, or the infrastructure, the transportation system, so they can get from home to work, etc. A lot of this, for a narcissist like the president, he's just loving this. Less on him and more on the American people.
By the way, Booker was trying to say that in the interview. I think one of the things that Corey did well in that interview was he was trying to talk more about issues and less about the president. But let's go back to where this all really started. And when the president looks back on this, if he does get struck down, you know, he's carping about Don McGahn in a tweet yesterday. The people he should really be talking to are John Dowd and Ty Cobb, who gave the screwiest advice I've ever seen to a sitting executive by saying,
cooperate in part with
let the White House counsel go in and give all the testimony he wants without restriction.
He needs his money back for that.
Insane. Yeah, let me tell you something. I said to you, you remember on this show, that they were a C-level legal team at best on their best day. And let me tell you something. What's going on right now shows that I had great influence.
I want to move on, but let me play, before we move on, and then let me play devil's advocate on that point. Let's say that they had decided to hold the line. And in the face of holding the line, Mueller does in fact subpoena the president, does in fact subpoena these White House aides, and that makes the president, we all know the president, blow up and fire Robert Mueller. He'd be in much worse shape right now.
Listen, I just don't, Donald Trump's self-preservation gene would never have permitted him to fire Bob Mueller. Never have permitted him to do it, George. I mean, there's not much that I'm confident on. No, he didn't try. He did what Donald Trump does, which is to blow off steam, and if someone else wants to go and do it, well, then go ahead and do it. Well, that's not what I meant.
That's been the argument from a lot of people around him. He did touch the hot stove with Comey, and I think he saw that there was a bad lesson from that.
That's a big lesson he learned from that.
Number one, get Mueller in front of Congress. Number two, the legal team should have known what McGahn was saying from day one, and not find out until after the report.
No one interviewed Don McGahn before he got interviewed by Bob Mueller. Imagine the malpractice there. Donald Trump is a malpractice suit.
I'm not even
a
lawyer, and I know you're not supposed to do that.
I'm going to move on to the trade war right now. We saw the president impose tariffs on China on Friday, and Sung Min, and you wrote about this week as well. Again, calculated, it appears, political strategy by the president, perhaps hoping in the end this will force a deal, but if not, he seems pretty happy to take this to the voters.
Exactly, and I think it's his approach to trade has been really interesting, and the reaction from Republicans has been interesting as well, because, I mean, talking to a lot of Republican senators, they are not happy, clearly, with the president's trade policy, his protectionist stances, but they have made a little bit of a distinction between how he's approaching these trade talks with China versus, for example, the proposed auto tariffs or the steel and aluminum tariffs, which they all hate and are warning the president off of. And I think the president and some Republican senators, even from those farm states, do see a little bit of a political advantage to showing that he's tough on China, and he's getting and he's cracking down on their on the policies of the past. But I'm talking to a lot of ag state Republican senators, and they say the farmers are still with you now, but there is.
The president's got Chuck Schumer with him on China.
Yeah, okay.
There's a range.
Okay, yeah. But here's what I would say, and I would go after the president for. There are 4 wars. You got China trade war. You got Iran. You got Venezuela. You got North Korea. Now you decided you want a Secretary of Defense? You should have been planning. You should have had a Secretary of Defense before you decided to have military confrontations in every one of them. Not China yet, but all you need right now is one mistake over one of the islands near China. One naval ship that goes a little too far. I think it's really, talk about, forget all the obstruction of justice, forget all that. What a malpractice of politics to literally have a confrontation going now between North Korea. You just took the coal ship. Iran, you sent another aircraft carrier and a whole squadron there. You have Venezuela in a standoff. And now is when you want the Secretary of Defense? You should have had this a year ago.
The president does seem reluctant to getting pushed into a confrontation in Venezuela. It does seem reluctant, clearly with North Korea, less so with Iran.
This is his personality. I mean, listen.
Yeah, but we need a foreign policy, not a personality.
I understand it, but I'm trying to explain this to you, Rob, so hang in there, okay?
Yeah. Well, I'm impatient, so hurry up.
I understand. This is his personality. He is not a confrontational person, despite what you see on Twitter, despite all those other things that you see. He is not a confrontational person in that type of way. So these situations are difficult for him. And I think the other thing that you see going on here on China is no one should be surprised at this. If there's one thing he has been philosophically consistent on for 30 years,
absolutely,
has been trade and using tariffs, and that we're getting ripped off. First it was the Japanese, now it's the Chinese, and he's been completely consistent on that. So no Republican sitting in Congress should be saying, I can't believe this is happening.
But here's
who they voted for.
Chris, here's the difference is, he may not want a confrontation, but Bolton and Pompeo and the Secretary of State, they clearly want a very heads-on.
That's Iran and North Korea. I do want to stick on China for just a second and put this to Maggie, because I think this is going to put the president's principles to the test. What do they call it on Wall Street now, the Trump put? That he's not going to allow the stock market to fall too far. So far, it appears that the finance community believes that he is going to get a deal, that he's not going to keep on pushing these tariffs. Hard to know.
Could end up like the farmers. At what point do they end up moving away from him? We don't know how far he's going to push this. And I think one of the difficulties in assessing his policies on any issue, on trade, on foreign policy, is he has this series of competing impulses. He had this competing impulse that wanted to go for the tax bill and that helped a lot of people in parts of the country that are now getting hit by these tariffs. So I don't think he has a long-term strategy for this. I don't think he has a long-term strategy for most of these ends. I think he is doing what he has to do to get through small increments of time, and I'm not sure where this ends.
Let's keep using the market analogy. Here's the hedge on the Trump put, the infrastructure bill. There's no doubt in my mind that the reason he is pushing for that now is because he's concerned that because of the tariff policy, there might be some slowdown on it. So what he wants to do is pump $2 trillion into the economy through infrastructure, which will help to hedge against any damage to tariff.
Is he going to get Republicans in Congress to go along with that? Is one of the big questions.
Not for $2 trillion, no, not way.
I don't think you can figure out Republicans for a $2 bill on the infrastructure. It was $1 trillion, now it's $1 trillion. He still hasn't found the money for the first $1 trillion. This is a joke. Everybody knows it's a joke. In the meeting by himself, he went from $1 trillion to $2 trillion, and Nancy, to Chuck, to their credit, said very simply, show us the money.
Show us how to pay for it.
Right.
Well, listen, and I think what you're going to see is the president try to push Republicans in the direction of, he knows he's not going to get $2 trillion. So it's kind of typical President Trump material. We'll start with $2 trillion, and he'll declare victory at $1 trillion, and he has the Democrats saying that they're for it. Think about that. If he gets a bipartisan win on infrastructure, gets $1 trillion pumped into the economy pre-election,
he'll be a child of Keynes.
Big if, but that would be a big victory for him. One thing, Maggie, the president does seem to have also decided that Joe Biden is the candidate who's most like him, running for president this time around, which makes him his prime enemy.
Yes, and I was a little perplexed by that statement, candidly, because there is no way in which Joe Biden is like the president, other than that he's leading the early polls, and that is literally it. It has aggravated a number of the president's political advisors that he is elevating Joe Biden in this way and essentially turning him in to the general election candidate now. Joe Biden has a primary that could be very difficult for him to get through, and a lot of the president's advisors are saying, just hang back, stop zeroing in only on him.
But in the short term, Ram, it does appear to have been a boon to Joe Biden to have the president going after him. I mean, I think people expected him to come into the race perhaps as a front runner, but he's gone far beyond what a lot of people thought he would go beyond in these early stages.
The lesson so far is Joe Biden, to everybody that analyzes, talks about politics, Democrats are more pragmatic than those who are actually on the base, quote-unquote, screaming. As I always say in politics, sound is not always fury. It is not always fury. And my point, Joe Biden has moved. Here's the overarching ideological goal for Democrats: winning. Everything else is just shades of gray. That's what they care about. What Biden shows right now, there's a pragmatic center. Pragmatic that says we want to win. And if Biden's the ticket, we're going right there. And to everybody that says, oh, this is what the base wants, this is what it, show me the votes.
So now
show me what you got.
Other Democrats struggling to even get heard at this point.
Well, that's true, but I still think I'm one of those advisors who thinks it's a mistake for the president to do this. I could pick, of the 22, I could pick probably 21 others I'd rather run against if I were Donald Trump than Joe Biden. And I just think that it's
19
a mistake.
to count.
I think it's a mistake for him to be doing what he's doing now. Listen, there's a lot of things that I thought he did mistakenly in 2016. He wound up winning, and he'll remind me of that when we get off the air. But the point is that I think Joe Biden's the one guy, and I've said this all along, who can go into Michigan and Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania and appeal to white working class voters. The president doesn't need that type of opponent. He needs an opponent who will repel those white working class voters and keep his coalition together. Absolutely.
It is creating a dilemma for the other Democrats, particularly those Democrats. You've got almost 10 of them in the House and the Senate, just struggling to get some kind of attention, hoping that their policy proposals would get some traction.
Exactly. And I think, when you're in a field that vast, you need to find a way to create your own lane. And, obviously the interview with Senator Booker was fascinating, where he's been trying to be the candidate of hope and love and all this fuzziness, and it doesn't seem to be gaining traction right now. It does make you wonder whether he does tack towards a more confrontational approach if he realizes it isn't working. But they're all trying to find their own lane, and it's just not.
The debates start in a month. I think we're going to have a much clearer sense of what's happening in the Democratic primary when the debates
start. So, they are going to start to winnow down the field.
The two things is, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, Bernie Sanders set the pace. Biden's now setting the pace. Biggest deal. If you're on the panel of the debate in a month from now, and you're not with Joe Biden, nobody's going to.
That was what I wanted to pick up on.
Nobody will see it here.
We know these first debates are going to have 10 candidates over 2 nights, 10 candidates each night. It's possible that even though we think they're going to be the big events, that they may not turn out to be the events that people expect, because it just gets all muddied up over 2 nights.
Well, if you look back on 16 in that race and the 10 candidates who were there the first stage in August in Cleveland, 9 candidates didn't matter. Donald Trump that night was the only candidate who mattered. I was standing on the stage and feeling it the way lots of other people were. Is Joe Biden going to be able to dominate in that same way? I don't think so. And I think the reason these are going to be important is because someone else will emerge. I don't know who, but someone else will. Biden does not have the type of personality that will dominate the way that Trump did.
But does he have to dominate the debate if it's over 2 nights, if no one else breaks out?
Here's the thing. He is going to focus on Trump. Trump is going to focus on him, and he's going to be the center of energy. Yes, somebody will emerge. That's the process. And first of all, everybody, I have to take this advice myself. These are like every 25 feet on literally a 26-mile. Okay, we all need to get our medication early.
Okay? 4 years ago was President Jeb Bush.
But I do think the governor's right. I think that why the energy was all on Donald Trump was he was willing to do things that no other candidate was willing to do during those debates, and everybody else got up on that stage knowing he could train the insult gun at them at any moment. Joe Biden's not going to do that. So I just think it creates.
But here's one thing that Biden will do. Biden will talk about Trump. Yes, and everybody else will try to make Biden bait them, and he is going to date. Look, there's a long way to go.
Look,
and the history for the vice